Back to work.
Well, welcome back. This is now the third installment in my little adventure building a LETH. At this point, we're down to finishing it up. Everything's all welded together. That's the whole thing there. It just needs to be profiled on the outside edges, and the inside edges aren't quite exactly right. Got to take the welds down. Got to make sure that I haven't left any pockets. There are no cracks in the welds, and if there are, got to weld back over them. And then I gotta normalize it, take as much stress out of it, make sure the handles are nice and smooth, because the next step is hardening it, and once it's hardened, it's gonna be a lot harder to smooth it out. At the end of the video, well, about halfway through it, we switch over to that. I'm gonna build a forge and put it in the fire and see what happens, and, well, spoiler alert, doesn't go exactly the way I was hoping. Oh well. I was in a rush. Shouldn't rush. Really wanted to get it done. And maybe a little bit more planning would have really helped. But I was trying not to spend a whole lot more money, and I was really trying to get it done. And now, my neck hurts. You can see me here just getting it all cleaned up, and this is taking just forever. As I have with almost every step of this, I am reflecting once again that were I to be doing this as a job to support myself, so, you know, note to myself for the future, this is not how I would have done this. This is definitely not the fastest, most effective way to create this object. By a lot. So in a minute here, I decide to stop, take a week, and build a 2x72 belt grinder. A 2x72 is a pretty standard knife making, sword making, etc. tool, and I just didn't have one. I'm going to use it to, take this thing down to actually flat on the sides as close as I can, and then put the bevels in and all of that. And I'm just going to speed through it really quickly here, because it was 5 or 6 hours of footage, and there are much better videos out there of how to make one of these. But there you go, look at me. Look how fast I'm moving. Had a little help from my dad, did some milling for my brother, did some welding, and then flattened the blade out. Now I'm working on the inside of those handles, just filing and filing and filing. I have a little drum sander attachment there, but it didn't really do anything but the final polish. Yeah, this is all about, I don't know, 60 times faster than normal speed. These are only the parts I actually recorded. But it's coming together, you know? It really started to clean up well. Okay. So here's where we are. It is significantly lighter now. Did some straightening very carefully with some clamps and some pieces of angle iron and a pivot. I assume that when it comes time to normalize this thing, that's going to come back and haunt me, because there's probably some more stresses in that metal that are going to want to undo themselves by bending back. It has some issues hither and thither, but I think really this is what it's going to be. I'm going to continue what I started experimenting with last night, which was beveling this bloody thing. This part's pretty easy, relatively. It's just trying to do it consistently and nice. But then you get to this. Working with this on this thing was just, I mean, it was amazing. It moved so much steel so fast. I took pounds of steel off of the thing, and it became light and wieldable. Putting the bevels in honestly worked really well. I spent less time building the grinder and doing all the rest of the grinding than I had on all of the previous grinding combined. Only cut myself a few times holding it. It's fine. Little cuts. Now is going to be a lot more grinding. So I'm going to pause there, do as much of this as I can, and we'll come back and take a look. Alright, so that's more or less ground to where it needs to be. Yeah, I had to even the edge out quite a bit and gave up on filing because it was taking too long, and just practiced with the sander for a while. I'm pretty happy with where it is. With the exception of the few low spots that are going to have to be addressed through very careful hand sanding later. But it's ready to be thrown into a fire. At which point, I need the fire. So the next step will be both making a quenching vessel and building a temporary forge that can heat this. Now I'm about to build this thing, and I want to get it up off the lawn, because I don't want to burn the lawn, and I got some cinder blocks and a pellet. And you look at that and say, well, you're building it on wood, that's not a great idea. Well, it'll probably be fine. That was my theory. And it was. Keep the wood wet, just douse it with a bucket, and it was only going to be run maybe twice, once to normalize and once to harden it, and it was going to work on the first try, so it'll be fine. Totally. That's a piece of Schedule 40 pipe, drilling a bunch of holes in it, and then attaching it to an old air mattress pump. Believe it or not, that little duct tape tube fitting worked almost perfectly. It didn't melt, didn't, puncture, was just fine. This is just a test firing now, make sure it's all gonna actually function and get hot enough, make sure it's long enough for the sword there. Anyway. So pretty. Let's ruin it. Getting it in there is a little difficult. You gotta push all the charcoal aside, which is also an issue. Means later on, if I take it out with the fire up, and it's not hot enough, I'm not gonna be able to get it back in. So I have to be certain it's ready to go before I pull it out. But here I'm just normalizing the back there, trying to take any stresses out. At least that's what I thought I was doing. But it doesn't work. No, it really doesn't. And that will become readily apparent in just a moment, where I'm getting my first glimmer of why what I thought would work wouldn't. As I feared, we have a big old warp right there in the back. I suspect that just due to the shape of it, the interconnected shape, when that expands, it's going to push, but those don't want to move because they're not as hot. Angle iron and clamps, maybe? I'm gonna let it cool down all the way, see what it does, and then cry. Okay, we have a plan. So yeah, just gonna reheat this, clamp it between some angle iron to get that bend out and let it cool down while it's straight. And I decided to just go for it. I have the suspicion that this isn't gonna work, but I have to try because I don't know what else to do at this point. I'm tired and rushing, and I've long since given up on any hope of making money on this, and that's already not counting the time. But material-wise, I'm losing money at this point. Anything else I try is gonna just make me lose more, so I really want this to work. I figure, well, maybe the quench will counteract the warping it's probably gonna do, or keep the warping low enough that I can fix it in the tempering. Not that I have any idea how I'm gonna do the tempering, because I don't have a tempering oven big enough, or really any tempering oven. It's not gonna fit in my oven in my kitchen, that's for sure. You can see me there with the torch trying to get the temperature more evenly distributed, and you're going to see me in a second here. I'm going to put charcoal briquettes along the top. That's just for insulation. That's not your recommended fuel for a forge. It's just trying to allow the heat to get high enough on the blade that it could maybe spread out. And a few times here I'm turning on and turning off the air supply to let the heat sort of even out over the whole piece. And here we go. This is going to go perfectly. First try. No question. 100%. Ow, my hands are on fire. Yeah, that is not needed heat, but in it goes. Nope. and over it goes. Damn. Except the quench tank was too flimsy.
That's gonna be great for the lawn.
The oil pressure pushed the sides apart, lowered the overall level, so to try and get the whole blade under the oil, hoping that despite the uneven heat, it was still enough, I tilted it slightly, and then the whole thing jerked and almost doused me with burning oil.
Not as bad as I was afraid it would be, but it is bad.
I was really hoping that would work. We were close. We were very close. It warped in the middle of each handle. And I think, once again, it's because of this shape. When this gets bigger, this doesn't want to, so it has to push out to the side. I'm going to let this warm up again. I'm going to clamp it, fix that warp best I can, and then think about what I've done. I'm going to sit here and think for a while, come up with a lot of theories, but nothing that I think of in this next couple minutes is going to work.
It was very close to working. This is going to take some thinking. Damn, that was cool, though. A little more planning on a few key areas would definitely have helped.